Hello, good evening, everyone. I am Swagata Yadavar. I'm an independent health journalist and I write about public health policies. I'll be your moderator for the panel discussion today. Today's discussion is powered by Cuddles Foundation and organized by ET Health World. To give us some context for today's topic, a recent Lancet Oncology Commission estimated that in 2020, in the next 30 years, about 13.7 million children will be diagnosed with cancer across the globe. A staggering 11.1 million children, they predict, would succumb to the disease by 2050 if they don't proactively invest in access to healthcare services and cancer treatment. Low and middle income countries like India will bear the brunt of most of these cases with 84.1% of fatalities. In India, the estimates of number of children, that is from 0 to 19 years, who are diagnosed with cancer every year is about 50,000. Yet in countries like India, only an estimated 15 to 45% of children are cured of cancer compared to 80% in high-income countries. Also highlighted in the recent impact study by childhood cancer in India by Cuddles Foundation. Today, we would like to welcome our esteemed panelists who will share their perspectives on state of pediatric cancer in India, challenges and solutions, and the audience for supporting and being part of this event. We are very privileged to have some of the most influential names of industry in the field of oncology research, non-profit and corporates with us today. From oncology, we have Dr. Anil D'Cruz, presently the Director of Oncology at Apollo Hospitals and the former Director at Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai. He currently also serves as the President of Union for International Cancer Control, UICC, 2020 to 2022. Welcome, Dr. D'Cruz. With us, we also have Dr. Girish Chinnaswamy, who is a professor and head of division of pediatric oncology at Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai. Dr. Chinnaswamy has a wide experience in teaching and training medical and paramedical personnel at different levels, including pediatricians, oncologists, nursing personnel, etc. Additionally, he's a faculty and organizer of various clinical trial workshops, CREDO and others, and member of Research Ethics Committee. Welcome, Dr. Chinnaswamy. We also have from research, Dr. Ravi Mehrotra. He's an advisor to Datar Cancer Genomics and former CEO of ICMR and National Institute of Cancer Prevention and Research. He also serves as the adjunct professor of epidemiology at the Rollins Institute of Public Health, Emory University, Atlanta, in addition to the Brunel and York universities in the UK. Welcome, Dr. Mehrotra. From the non-profits, we have Purnota Dattabhal, who is the CEO and founder of Cuddles Foundation and is focused on giving children with cancer a chance to cure through holistic nutrition. Cuddles Foundation Food Heal program offers nutritional counsel and holistic food aid to underprivileged children fighting cancer. Welcome, Purnota. From corporate, we have Charu Thapar, who is the Executive Director, Property and Asset Management, APAC, and also spearheads the diversity and inclusion initiatives firm-wide and champions the CSR initiatives for India. Welcome. So I'd like to begin the panel with a question to Dr. Anil and Dr. Girish. Several industry reports highlight that 40% of children are malnourished at the time of diagnosis. How does malnourishment impact cancer in children, cancer treatment in children?
Swagata, Girish, in deference to age, maybe I'll go first.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm an oncologist, I'm an administrator. I also am committed to global cancer control, serving as the UICC president. So I'm not really a pediatrician. So my comments will be general. Of course, I have, as an administrator, dealt with children and problems that they face. But Swagata, malnutrition is a problem not only in children, it's a problem in all cancer treatments. Now, most cancer treatments consist of surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. All of them take a toll on your body. And it's logical that if you're well nourished, you will tolerate these treatments much better. So in our country, if you have a patient who is malnourished, completing treatment is always an issue. They are not able to go through their treatment very broadly. And I gather our audience today are non-medicos. So I'm not going to make very specific comments on metabolic cycles and things like that. But basically, if you have a malnourished kid, it's logical that they're not going to tolerate the entire treatment. They have more toxicity, treatment is not completed, and to put it very simply, it adds to poorer outcomes. A very general and logical statement to your question. Maybe Girish wants to add something to that.
Thank you, Dr. D'Cruz. And Swagata, as you have already highlighted, and Dr. D'Cruz has mentioned, that a large proportion of patients in India, both children and adults, are malnourished. And just to give you the numbers in India, about 48% of the children who come to these large centers across the country, when we did a survey about the 4 largest pediatric oncology centers in the country, 48% of the children came with what is called severe and acute malnutrition. Now, there is a background malnutrition in children already in the country. And on top of that, when you get cancer, it is a highly energy consuming disease. So it consumes all the energy that the child is taking. And then you tend to lose weight even more rapidly. So there's a downward trajectory in a very, very rapidly quick time. And that's why you call it as a severe and an acute malnutrition on a child who already has a substantial number of them who already have a chronic malnutrition. And as Dr. D'Cruz said, tolerance to your treatment becomes very poor. There are more side effects, more hospital admissions, more infections, in fact, more deaths, and also more long-term side effects of chemotherapy. So there are multiple problems we see in these children. And that's why it is a huge issue now.
Thank you, Dr. Girish and Dr. Anand. The next question is to Dr. Girish and Dr. Ravi. What are the primary reasons for delayed diagnosis amongst children in India as well as globally?
So, Dr. Ravi, do you want me to go first?
Dr. Ravi?
Yeah, please do. Go ahead.
So, childhood cancer is a rare disease. If you see that about in 100 cancer patients who come to any cancer center, only 5 of them will be children and about 95 will be adults. And the childhood cancer consists of a wide spectrum of disease. And most of the symptoms of childhood cancer are very much like common ailments, except that they go on for a very long period of time and they don't go away like common ailments. So for example, one of the commonest features of a childhood cancer is fever. But the fever is multiple reasons a child gets fever. But if the fever persists 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks on and doesn't go away and keeps coming more frequently than expected, that is when the penny should drop and doctor should suspect there is something more than a routine common cold or cough going on. So like that, there are many symptoms which are common ailment symptoms. And because it's a rare disease, it is difficult for many pediatricians to pick it up on the first go. And in India, where the healthcare system is a pretty heterogeneous healthcare system with no clearly defined referral patterns from one place to another, there is a long lag time between the child actually being suspected to have cancer or for that matter any other chronic diseases and getting referred to a tertiary center. So that's one of the reasons why there is a significant lag time for childhood cancer to be diagnosed. And the lag time exists even in the West. It is not that it's only in India. Because the symptoms are rare, the lag time for childhood cancer is not hugely different from in the West, except that once the suspicion is made, the time to reach a tertiary center is faster. So that's the biggest difference what you see between West and India.
Dr. Ravi?
I would agree with Girish, a colleague. In addition to what he's mentioned, I would just like to mention 2 more things. First of all is lack of awareness of even our medical professionals. And he has mentioned about the delay in referring to a tertiary center once even the diagnosis is made. Because quite often we can diagnose cancer, but the point is by the time the person reaches tertiary center is sometimes a lag of 2 to 3 months, and then the individual may find it difficult to get the appropriate treatment because it may have progressed, especially in cases of blood cancers or leukemias as they call it. Now, I know the Tata Hospital and a few others are taking the cue from them. They've started a program called the KVAT program, which is looking at patient navigators who could help people reach, and there are various non-governmental and governmental organizations which are seized with this matter, who make sure that these individuals are receiving, because you can imagine a person coming from a rural or a semi-urban background coming to a major center with thousands of beds, and he or she gets totally confused who to go, where, who's the right person. There are touts, there are all sorts of travel issues, there's money that is not there, and that causes a limitation as far as diagnosis is concerned. Number two, we see India is a huge country, and the tertiary care centers and the major metros are obviously few and far between. For a person, say, in the middle of Northeast, in Meghalaya or Sikkim, for example, which doesn't have any major cancer center. Sikkim is just about starting, actually, as a matter of fact, but Meghalaya has one. But to reach from a far-flung area and to be in contact with the individual in a government setup or even a private setup is not everybody's cup of tea. And it, of course, is expensive. These are some of the reasons, in addition to what Dr. Girish has talked about.
Thank you, Dr. Mehrotra. The next question is to Dr. Anil. Even though childhood cancer is highly curable, 80% of children abandon their treatment in lower and middle income countries due to financial constraints and false beliefs that cancer is incurable or consider alternative medicines. This is attributed to low awareness in holistic care. What are the solutions to improve awareness and provide holistic care? And what are the efforts taken by the health industry to do that?
So Swagata, again, to answer this question of yours, as I'm introspecting on what Girish and Ravi said, you see, there are two problems to these issues. Today, we are discussing specifically on pediatric cancers. But when you look at whether it's late diagnosis, malnutrition, poorer outcomes, it's something that ails all our cancers in our country. And if I had to look at this broadly, there are two reasons. One is the socio-economic fabric of our society, the healthcare system of our society. And this uniformly affects every age and every cancer. And in my understanding of the problem, this plays a very, very important part in late diagnosis and everything else. So that's one sector which probably is not in our hands. As our country's economy grows, we have more, more inputs into health expenditure. Probably that our primary healthcare improves, that will be okay. The second is lack of awareness, and this lack of awareness is both with the family, with the general public, as well as us doctors. When at two time points in my career, I did a study to find out why patients come in late. Why do they abandon treatment? One when I was a junior and one somewhere towards the end of my career at Tata's. I've still got a long way to go in my career, but at least at Tata's when I exited. And very often healthcare professionals basically are not aware about cancer. Cancer is not part of the curriculum in most of our medical schools. So I think our training needs to go back. We need to have better training. Doctors should be aware. There's an English saying, what the mind doesn't know, the eye doesn't see. So like Girish said, the pediatrician doesn't diagnose. That index of suspicion is not there. And probably if a child came with fever to Girish, even if he had malaria or just a viral, Girish would be doing a smear to rule out a cancer. I mean, everything, when you have a hammer in your hand. So I think we have to strike a balance. And this early diagnosis, awareness, educating patients, educating family, parents that this could be a cancer, couldn't be a cancer, goes hand in hand with development, with the improvement in our society. Now, to make people aware of a cancer which has 50,000 cases in the year, in a 1.4 billion population, sometime maybe it may not be cost effective. But I think if it's part and parcel of the entire developmental program, yes, people will be aware. And then there's certain high-risk people, families that may have cancer, they should be made aware that the earliest warning sign you need to run to your kid. Pediatric associations need to be aware that, listen, these 5-7 warning signs in kids are important. Don't be complacent. You don't have to treat them as a viral. Escalate, go to a specialist and get yourself diagnosed. I think it will be, just to conclude, and again, in the interest of time, it should be a sum of general development plus targeting both the population and pediatricians, or the main catchment area, to get them early and to see that there's not dropouts in the treatment.
Thank you, Dr. D'Cruz. And some of the reasons why patients discontinue treatment is also for the lack of holistic care. So I'll come to Purnota and ask her about how do we provide a holistic and supportive care for children dealing with cancer in India, and what kind of investment is needed from the government as well as the corporates to do so?
Yeah, thank you, Swagata. So, Dr. D'Cruz and Dr. Girish both very beautifully spoke about why nutrition is important, right? And what Cuddles Foundation does is our mission is to provide nutrition to children who are fighting cancer so that they are able to take and complete treatment. So we have been able to develop a very simple but a very beautiful plug and play model that can be rolled out in any hospital, which has basically 3 parts to it. The first part is capacity building, where we provide the government hospitals and centers with nutritionists. These nutritionists work very, very closely with the doctors, like our doctors here, like Dr. Girish, and they assess the grade of malnourishment of every child who walks through that door. Then, based on the grade of malnourishment, she will write, and the kind of cancer impact and the treatment, she will write a nutrition prescription. And the second thing that we do is we actually provide what's in the prescription, because 80% of our parents that we've been seeing, that Cuddles have been interacting with, have monthly incomes of less than 10,000 rupees. So they are not able to afford what's there in the nutrition prescription. And we also provide things like, we provide supplements, we provide things like Trupton biscuits, etc. in meals. But I think one of our most powerful programs that we do is the ration bundle program. You just spoke about the abandonment rate in countries. One of the key reasons is also poverty. As they say, cancer is a disease for the rich. So we identify people who are at the risk of abandoning the treatment, and we actually provide the families with ration bundles, which last the whole family and the child for the period of 1 month till the child comes back for treatment. And this takes care of 100% of the calorific need of the child. And the third and the last thing that we do, and I think it's very beautiful, is we work a lot with parents. We do a lot of parent support groups, because what we want to do is we want to train the parents to take care of the children in the limited means that they have. Once they leave the hospital, we do not want them dependent on organizations or Cuddles for that matter. So these are the things that we do. But having said that, I think the reason we are doing well, the reason the center is doing better and better, Tata is doing better and better, all other hospitals, because really for a child and a family to succeed, you need a full ecosystem. So not only nutrition, you need accommodation, you need transportation, you need money to give to the parents for just tests and blood tests that they are not able to get. So while we're talking of the ecosystem, coming to your point of what can the government do, and I've been doing this for about 8 years, and in my opinion, I think the investments that is required is really where nutritionists are mandated the way nurses are, the way doctors are. They're mandated in hospitals. There's a budget for them in the hospital so that they are able to take care of the children, because honestly, nutrition and treatment, any kind of treatment, why only cancer, is complementary. So when we think about our dream of really what do we want to achieve at the end of it, what we want to achieve is to put ourselves out of the business and to see a day where this becomes a part of the norm and not a service that's being provided by a not-for-profit.
Thank you, Purnota. This is a question to Dr. Girish and Dr. Anand. What are the various programs that you've been exposed to lately as a way to increase the chances of survival amongst children that should be adopted by the ecosystem? Are there any solutions?
So quickly, I don't want this to get lost. I mean, Purnota very nicely gave about what Cuddles is doing, and congratulations to your group. I've been closely associated. I mean, nutrition is just so important, and you all have really made an impact. But when I was director of Tata's, there was a program that was started called the Impact Foundation. And I'm sure it's not in my place to talk about it. Girish would be a better person because he's an integral part of that program. But suffice to say, they provide holistic support to pediatric patients and the entire family. They look at all aspects. And abandonment rate at the Tata Memorial Hospital fell from 25% to 3%. And that's because there was provision. This comes with a lot of heavy funding. Tata's has a lot of goodwill. It's a tertiary referral center. They have very active people, Shalini and others, who really go around garnering support. It's a very, how should I say, a theme that resonates with donors. And people given money, and that's why it was possible there. But I'm again making a very general comment rather than being very specific. You see, when you look at the success of treatment of pediatric cancers, it will be in high volume, niche area centers that have a good infrastructure. So the message I want to give is pediatrics is a rare cancer. Look at any center, like say Tata's, look at St. Jude's in the US, they specialize. My plea, again, as a senior administrator and as an oncologist, is that pediatric cancer should therefore not be treated at every hospital in the city. And I think there are very nice models like the Colombian pediatric cancer treatment model vis-a-vis other countries stands out to bear testimony to this point. So I think to make any program successful, it should be referred to a center that not only has the doctors to treat the infrastructure, but most importantly, the support system. And that's something that's lacking in many places that treat cancer in our country. Again, before I hand over to Girish for some more specifics, when you look at incidence to mortality ratio for all cancers across the world, in the West, it's 1:3. That means for every 3 diagnosed, only one cancer succumbs. This is for all cancers. I know pediatric has better outcomes, but in India and in a lot of developing countries, it's 2 to 3. So for every 3 that we diagnose, 2 succumb. And it's exactly the same, these kind of skewed figures. If it's 80% in the West, in our country, it's a 50% success rate. So making a strong plea that it should be with specialists that have everything, in your words, and the right word, a holistic support system to treat patients. Girish, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. D'Cruz. I couldn't agree more both with you and Purnata on that. The point I want to make is that it is just not enough to set up a medical component of cancer treatment. The support systems are very, very important. The important thing is to identify what are the supports needed in your hospital and for your community. And the support systems needed in Mumbai will be very different from support system needed in a tier 2 city. The support system needed in Africa would be very different from what we need in centers in India. So those areas have to be identified. And just to give how we did that is that we actually did a survey about 12 years back to identify why children abandon treatment. So children who abandon treatment, 480 of them, we contacted them, and unfortunately most of those children had died. But a majority of the parents were able to tell us why they came to Tata and did not continue treatment. And we identified specifically 7 areas which were there. Some of it is already discussed, and one of them was finance. So we had to make sure finance is taken care. But there are many other issues which are unique to Mumbai. Accommodation is a major issue in Mumbai. People are coming from far off and staying here, do not have relatives to provide blood and platelets product support. All cancer treatments require a lot of blood product support. Then there is that huge belief that cancer is not curable. And then there is, of course, the nutrition problem. They don't, not only the child, but the whole family. Who will take care? Who will feed the rest of the family? They moved from faraway states like Northeast to UP to Bihar to Bengal and come here. And who would actually take care of they know there's loss of livelihood. So there are multiple issues which came, including education of the child, etc. And we worked on many of these factors, and it was not possible for the medical fraternity or the hospital alone to do this. It was critical to build partnerships with governmental and non-governmental organizations in the city. And that's how many partnerships were built in Tata Memorial Hospital pediatric department, as it's done in many adult departments as well. And Cuddles was one of them, and many others who provided accommodation, finance support, etc. And we were able to provide what we discussed as holistic care, and that's what significantly brought down the abandonment. That it is critical for us to identify the areas the families and the child need the support, and then build your support systems on the needs. And the same model what we do here may not be necessary to do it in, say, CMC Vellore or somewhere like that.
Thank you, Dr. Chandraswamy. To provide holistic care, we need support. And I'll come to Charu with this question about what role can corporations play in supporting causes like childhood cancer, which is a niche issue. And what is this kind of support that you need from the health industry to provide the support?
So firstly, thanks for having me on this panel, Swagata. An honor to be amongst the company of such well-known doctors and Purnota. So, I think Schedule 7 has made it very easy for the corporates to align with their, goals. So for us, one of the goals we have picked up under Schedule 7 for CSR is preventative health, education, equality, women empowerment, disaster management, and environment and sustainability. So under the preventative health segment, we've been working with the Cuddles Foundation. It resonated really well with us when we had dialogue with them that nutrition is a huge enabler to ensure success in treatment. As a supporter of this mission, we realized, and I think we heard all the doctors talking about awareness, right? So we realized that nutrition is a key to achieving success for childhood cancer because it's often diagnosed late, socioeconomic reasons, and a lot of what has already been said. And I would add on that I think the situation gets further challenging for the girl child, where the abandonment rate is even higher. So I think what we need to do is be the flag bearers when the medical fraternity or NGOs such as Cuddle approach the corporates on how we can help, because as you said, in the evolved and the in the higher economic countries, the success rate is much higher than we experience, which is 15 to 45% is what you said, Swagata. How can we help in improving that rate? How can we bring policy level changes? How can we partake in and contribute towards well-funded programs which will lead to better outcome, given socioeconomic reasons are such a huge issue over there. Capacity and skill building. How can we partner with technology to bring data for arriving at better outcomes, Swagata, and also help with funding life-saving research. So I think, better collaboration, better awareness between the medical fraternity and the NGOs will only help what the corporate sector can do.
Thanks, Charu. Coming to Dr. Ravi, I want to ask about the role that research can play in improving survival and morbidity in childhood cancer, and what are the recent advances in childhood cancer?
Yeah, thank you so much, Swagata. That, of course, is one of our success stories that I'm sure you are aware. One of our earliest problems that we used to face was leukemias, and children normally have what is known as the acute lymphatic leukemia. And it was a nearly uniformly fatal disease. But due to advances in various therapies, especially chemotherapy and more recently bone marrow transplants, for people who could afford it, the survival rate is actually in the West more than 80 to 90%. Now you would ask, that is great, but what do we do in India? Unfortunately, and my friends in the pediatric oncology departments of various hospitals, including our colleagues from Tata, will, I'm sure, agree with me that it is nowhere near 80 to 90%, which is practically, by and large, a curable disease for children, maybe infants, maybe young adults, who could actually, the younger it is, the better the prognosis or better the chances of survival as well as normal life are. We are nowhere in that picture. So that is the kind of research we actually need very seriously. We need research on early diagnosis, which we have all just talked about. We talked about some of the barriers to early diagnosis. And at the same time, all is not doom and gloom. Most of the progress against cancer, both in adults and in children, of course, has its origins from basic research which is done in laboratories, often in areas which are not directly related to the disease. Something else comes up and then people work it out, smart people in the West and in India as well now, gradually. Now, pediatric oncology is coming to be a specialty on its own, and we have some good centers, unfortunately, much fewer than what we would like to have. To give you a case in point, this is the technology you might have heard about called CRISPR-Cas. This is basically gene editing. This has revolutionized the study of genes that control cancer growth and survival, both in childhood and adult. Unfortunately, it's not very widely available. It is not very inexpensive. It's an extremely expensive business. Similarly, we have technologies which are, especially with molecular targeted therapies, immunotherapies. There has been a lot of push that why we should be importing all these therapies from the West. After all, this very small percentage of people can afford it. But now, my own organization where I was working till recently, ICMR, DST, DBT, have funded many researchers. The most recent one, when I was working at the India Cancer Research Consortium, was funded to two funds actually, to IIT Bombay and to Tata. The one at PGI, which are looking at developing drugs or repurposing drugs which are old, which may be for something else, to actually work for cancer. And some of them have been in the area of childhood cancers. So a lot of work is going on. However, there is in addition to the points mentioned by my colleagues and fellow panelists, Anil and Girish, I would also like to put a plug in for good quality nursing care, which unfortunately, because nurses in our country, you require specially trained nurses, especially for diseases like therapies like bone marrow transplantation. And it is expensive business to not only train the nurses, but also to retain them. Many of them find better pastures outside the country or in major metro hospitals in the private setup. Not to say that private setup is bad. I think for India, we have to have a mix of both private and public, as it is more than 70% care is from the private setup. So I'm not really castigating anybody else, but in fact, we need to put in research efforts, training efforts, not only in medical care, not only in immunotherapy, chemotherapy and bone marrow transplants for children where needed, but we also need to put in a lot of research for our even nursing care hospitals. Now, like the West, nursing specialists, they are PhDs in nursing. And I was very proud of the fact, and I gave it a lot of priority when we were doing a funding decision that one of the major nursing institutions in Manipal, they got a huge grant from ICMR to actually see how they can improve the on-ground level cancer care by nurses. So that is another area which we quite often tend to miss out. After all, as they say, good quality medical care, whether it's oncology or any other subject, really a lot of it not only depends on the doctors who are treating, but also on paramedical workers, including nursing assistants, physiotherapists. And I think, as Punota just mentioned, I think the importance of nutritionists, importance of people who look at palliative care, not only from the point of view of decreasing pain, but also improving the quality of life. At the same time, spiritual care. All these things are important, and each of them really needs to be a specific area of research. I'm very happy that now the Medical Council of India, in its new avatar, is also pointing towards soft skills. It is also pointing towards how we can have more empathy, because in busy hospitals like what you have in Bombay or in Delhi, it becomes next to impossible to devote the kind of care which you would like to. And I won't even start talking about our tier 2, 3 and more cities and smaller towns, where of course that is where the bulk of the country lies. I mean, I'm so happy to hear the kind of work with your foundation and many other NGOs are doing for Tata, but unfortunately there is a lot to be done. And I really wish and pray that your successes should be translated, and your success stories and lessons learned should be actually shared with so many other organizations which really need to be done. I mean, we would love to have islands of brilliance and islands of care and giving, but it needs to be further spread. And I would really be very keen to learn from your successes and to be able to partner with other organizations who are in a similar area.
Thank you, Dr. Mehrotra, for such a detailed answer about, the kind of care that needs not just clinical expertise, but also nursing care and other allied care. I'll come to Purnota and ask her, why is nutritional aid as important as counseling in childhood cancer? And what are the steps that you're taking for skilling and training of nutritionists who can understand the complexities of cancer?
Yeah, Swagata. So like I already mentioned that most of our parents who we interact with earn less than 10,000 rupees a month. And if I can tell you anecdotally, most of these people, if you take a Bombay or a Delhi or any big city, the kids under treatment are not from that city. The parents have come from villages or far-flung areas. The parents do not have any means of livelihood. And when they come here, they come on borrowed money, or they bring all their savings, which runs out. So really the situation is quite dire. And it's been made worse lately with COVID. So not only are they fighting poverty, not only are they fighting, for the life of their child, they're also fighting this whole pandemic where they have lost livelihoods. There have been stories where there have been people, there was a 70-year-old gentleman who cycled from Azamgarh to Varanasi with his sick grandkid, at the seat behind, and they came to the hospital to get one basket of ration. So the good part is we got to see that kid, and the child got his chemo cycle. But it just goes to say the desperate situation the parents and the families are right now. So there is no point only giving knowledge. What is as important is to give the aid, which is why aid is really, really important. Coming to your next question about skilling. So again, pediatric oncology nutrition is an extremely specialized field in nutrition and in dietetics. I would say it's at the cusp of medicine, because they have to understand the disease, of course, with the help of the doctors and the nutrition. So what we are doing is Cuddles Foundation does a lot of training programs. There are 2 massive training programs that happen every single year. There are annual trainings that happen. One is aimed at skilling, where the latest cutting edge research, where doctors come and speak about the latest developments in cancer care and cancer cure, and teach the nutritionists what is required for the specific requirements of a specific child. We also do something called the Q Fest, which is really aimed at bringing the best out of the nutritionists and bring their best selves into work. But what I'm most excited about is this new initiative called CICN, which is the Cuddles Institute of Clinical Nutrition, because there is a need for skilled nutritionists, skilled healthcare providers who understand nutrition in the country. And it's our goal to train about 10,000 such healthcare professionals in the next 5 years. As Dr. De Cruz was talking about, I'm going to use this, Dr. De Cruz, where you said what the mind doesn't know, the eye doesn't see. There isn't any knowledge or any training that's given to healthcare professionals around nutrition at all. So we have also started an initiative, we're piloting it with St. John's Hospital, where nutrition is being taught to first year, second year medical students so that they understand the importance of nutrition. And I'm really hopeful that we will, in the next 5 years, 7 years, have an army of people or army of nutritionists and healthcare professionals who will be able to tackle or who will be servicing kids and even adults with the knowledge of nutrition while they are under treatment, any kind of treatment.
The next question is to Charu. I want to talk about the CSR policies and how can you make it more collaborative to bring in innovative mechanisms that could be a solution for social causes like childhood cancer.
So I can talk from what we do, Swagata, is that we try to socialize it not just in accordance with what our CSR alignment is, but also with our people. We have, close to 18,000 people, and how we can bring empathy and use their time and their, bringing awareness towards them. How can they participate in patient, family, community, information, awareness, engagement? So, through our offices, we run programs whereby we go to hospitals and see how the nutrition care is happening, how we can participate in it, how our people can, be a part of this entire care community. How can we perhaps even be a part of socializing after the survivorship happens? How can we take part in reintegration of some of these people who are under this sort of treatment, etc. Organizing awareness drives in offices and communities that we work in and live in, bringing awareness to our own children, and that's something we do through talks and programs. We talk Cancer Awareness Month is something that we promote through fundraising campaigns, wearing the gold ribbon, sharing stories about childhood cancer in forums, and just generally encouraging conversations. So our community, our entire organization is quite involved and committed to the cause. And we bring it, it's not just for the company, it's also from the people. So that's how we try to marry the two.
Thank you, Charu. I'll just like to remind the audience that they can send in their questions. We have a eminent list of panelists today, and you could just send in your questions and we'll make sure that we ask them to the experts here. We have one question from the audience. This is, I'll just read down the question. What is the most prevalent type of childhood cancer, and what advice do you have for parents whose child have been diagnosed with cancer? Dr. Girish, I think you should take it up.
Thanks, Swagata. As already Dr. Mehrotra had mentioned, acute blood cancers are the most common cancer we see in children. So about 40% of the cases we see in children are either arising from the blood or lymph nodes, which we call as lymphomas. So you got blood cancers, which are leukemias and lymphomas. And the next commonest group of cancers are brain tumors, and the rest form the remaining 1/3 of them, which would be the bone, kidneys, and all other cancers, what we see. Now, coming to advice, what we would give, how we would counsel a parent, it's obviously for any parent, probably the worst moment of their life to know that their child has got cancer. And I think how many of our families we have counseled, we can never call ourselves that we have learned the art of counseling a parent, because every parent is different. Every parent goes through so much of anxiety, and every parent is a completely new ball game altogether, how to counsel them. But there are few things which we do, which really gives them a ray of hope. And the first thing is that childhood cancer is highly curable if treated appropriately. So we tell them that, okay, you now come here to our center, or you want to go to any other center where there is dedicated pediatric cancer units, and there you get a reasonably very good treatment which can be done, and the outcomes is pretty good. So that's the first line they would like to hear, that there is a ray of hope. And that's the general statement we make, that there is generally childhood cancers are curable, although we cannot tell you much more than this till we get the full information and see how the tumor responds. The second question all parents have is, will I cope with the financial expenditure of this? And that we have to have a system in place worked up before we meet the family. So we should be able to gauge from the initial interactions with the family whether they can financially manage it or not. And most of the times we are able to gauge that, and we are able to straight away reassure them, especially in most of the cancer hospital like ours. There are support systems in place to fund treatment. There are various government fundings available, various non-governmental organizations, corporate fundings available. So we tell them that there are various fundings available and we will actually help you to procure the funding, or we will fund it ourselves. So that's the second component which we need to do. So the third thing is all the other supports we talked about staying and bladder related support and education and nutrition support, etc. So that's how we actually start counseling, and that's our advice would be, that is not to lose hope, because there is a very good chance that your child with cancer will actually get cured and go on to lead a pretty much normal life.
That's a good thing to remind parents. Dr. Ravi, do you have something to add here?
Yeah, thank you, Swagata. I really loved the way Girish had put the rays of hope there. And having been into diagnostics and treatment, and quite often sat in on these counseling sessions with parents when they are told, it is a devastating experience, let me tell you that. But at the same time, I personally know at least a few scores of patients who, when they came to us as a young child, maybe not even a year or maybe 2 years old, with their parents, were diagnosed, were treated, and now they are full-grown adults. I mean, the last patient, the oldest patient I remember is nearly about 32 years of age. This young girl, they belonging to a relatively smaller city, she had practically given up hope. Fortunately, they were well connected with parents and grandparents. They could afford to get the best treatment possible within India. I'm talking about 35 years ago now, nearly. And now she has become a mother of a child, and there's so many others. So what I would really like to bring to your audience, that, it's not that everything is doom and gloom, and it's not that India, we are doing terribly. I mean, unfortunately, we are nowhere where we should be, but there's more and more centers coming up. And the fact that organizations like ADALS or various NGOs who are funding in the private as well as the government setup. Now there is this government program under the Ayushman Bharat, as you possibly know, in which the bottom 30% of India's population is covered. Unfortunately, the amount of money available for one individual is not more than 5 lakhs. But 5 lakhs in at least most of the government setups will take you a long way. So there has been a major change. And one of the, if you look at the dashboard of Ayushman Bharat, as far as the cancers are concerned, obviously adult cancers are much more, as I think Girish and Anil both pointed out, more than 90 to 95% adults. The maximum cancer is actually breast cancer, which has taken the maximum share of the money. But you do come across leukemia especially, then bone tumors, which again was mentioned, I think briefly, Ewing sarcoma. Some of the others actually have a reasonably good prognosis, and including leukemias and lymphomas, which are again form the bulwark of the patients. Unfortunately, not a lot can be done for brain tumors most of the time. But if things are caught early, especially for the blood-based tumors, which are nearly 30 to 40%, you have a reasonably good chance. And there's nothing more satisfying to a physician that warms the cockles of his or her heart to see a young individual whose parents had given up hope, and we could actually help them to become young, productive, not only professionals, caregivers, homemakers, and also parents in their own right. So that is the kind of message, we don't really talk about. Unfortunately, in most parts of the country, in the majority of the people, when you say cancer, is like actually a death sentence. And sometimes it is there. I'm not saying it is not. But in those situations where there is a good hope, there's a chance not only in the major cancer tertiary centers, but also in the smaller centers, if they are treated appropriately. And I'm sure the number of facilities that are there today and which are going to come up in the next few years is going to be a game changer. I really hope and pray again that the COVID situation that we just hopefully getting over with would have actually opened the eyes of people and given health the rightful importance, and health, not only awareness about disease, infectious diseases, but also things like cancer. People will be more aware, and hopefully the government will also put in more resources into this kind of a story. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Mehrotra. There's a question from the audience about what is a major challenge in childhood cancer research. Then they mention about that cancer, because cancers in children and adolescents are relatively uncommon and represent less than 1% of all new cases of cancer diagnosed in the United States every year. So is that the reason why, or is it a challenge in treatment and research?
So the childhood cancer is rare. So as we discussed already, that means a lot of the clinical trials which we want to conduct may not be possible to conduct in one center. So it's very critical to conduct clinical trials in childhood cancer as a cooperative group. So that means you bring centers across the country into one platform and conduct clinical trials or do research, or you go across geographic boundaries. So the whole success of childhood cancer globally has worked because globally pediatric oncologists have come together to form cooperative groups. So it's the Children's Oncology Group in USA, it is the Children Cancer and Leukemia Group in UK, and now a very vibrant Indian National Pediatric Oncology Group in India. So there is an Australian groups, and so there are every countries and every region has got a group as well. Now it is worked only through these platforms. So that is one of the biggest hurdle you need to cross to do good clinical trials in childhood cancer, that you should be able to actually collaborate nationally, regionally, or globally as well to actually conduct clinical trials. So the largest clinical, some of the largest clinical trials in childhood cancer, like the bone tumors in osteosarcoma or Ewing sarcoma, or even one of the lymph node cancers like Burkitt's lymphoma, has been conducted in more than 25-30 countries at the same time. So that's how the success rate has come in. So that's one of the bigger hurdles for childhood cancer compared to adult, where a large center like Tata on its own could do huge amount of research within the center because there's a large number of cases which would come into one center. So that's the first thing. The second thing we must remember is that in childhood cancer research, majority of the childhood cancers are curable by conventional chemotherapy. And the last chemotherapeutic drug which has been made or invented for childhood cancer is more than 40 years old. And if you actually put these conventional chemotherapy drugs well, deliver it well, you will cure 70% of the childhood cancer. And the next 10 to 15% require all these high-end therapies, your immunotherapy and targeted therapy and different types of high-end transplants, etc. So our research should be focused on what we want to do, what is the need of our country. And at the moment, the need of our country is to deliver standard multidisciplinary care to childhood cancer patients across the country in an evidence-based scientific way and uniformly do it. So that is what is the need in our country compared to say in US or the UK, where actually all these are done, and so they would go on to much more advanced therapy. It's not to say belittle science or advancement, it's not to belittle these newer therapies. They are very important as well for the remaining 30% of the patients, but this will give us a much more impactful outcome on childhood cancer survival. And that's why the whole WHO, St. Jude's, UICC, which Dr. Decruz heads, all of them have come together on this WHO agenda that by 2030, we should actually cure 60% of the childhood cancers globally. And the cure rate should move from 20% to 60% globally, or 30% to 60% globally by 2030. And the agenda is very simple. Train people, teach them how to do the treatment, collect data, and make sure you can deliver the treatment in as optimally as possible.
So Swagata, if I could just chip in and add to what Girish is saying, I totally endorse everything he said. And I think WHO gave a call in 2018 for the same figures that Girish is quoting, 30% to 60% across the globe. And it's a free download. UICC supports that program. And I'm today here also as president of the UICC. And those of you all interested, and just, again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all these. By 2013, we must achieve these figures. But I'm specifically going to comment on this research aspect that Girish said, rare cancers, the old drugs, 40 years old, absolutely correct. But when you look at research in pediatrics, one, it's underfunded. If you look at a big pot of money, the amount that's allocated to pediatric research is less than what would be allocated to other research. But I don't say it's, and I'm going to stick my neck out, and I'd love Girish to respond to this as well. Even if you gave a dedicated pot of money for pediatric research, the number of studies that would come forward, which are clinically relevant, are relatively few compared to other solid tumors in adults. Case in point, and I'm just quoting, at the Tatas, we had a dedicated fund called the Terry Fox Fund for research in pediatric cancers. It started purely as pediatric cancers. And very often, the extra money would spill out into other departments as well. And that's because probably there weren't enough projects coming forward. The 10 to 15% that fail are very complex researches. You're looking at genetics and sequencing and all that kind of stuff. So you really need to be very dedicated to pediatric research. In pediatrics, the biggest problem, and repeating what Girish said, just to drive this point home, is delivering simple, good care and seeing that your patients complete it. And that's why hats off to people like Purnota, Shalini out in Tatas that are making that possible. There are a lot of people who are doing that. And I love it in pediatrics because each of them is targeting one aspect towards the holistic care. Nutrition. If she put all her money on everything in pediatric support, it would be a bottomless pit. But just targeting nutrition is doing that results. And I'm appealing to people who are listening to us today, the attendees, whenever you'll donate, give it for a focused cause. I would always tell people who came into my office as director Tatas, I want to donate. I would say, listen, you can donate. They'll buy food for someone, Mosambis for someone, they'll buy blankets for someone. Adopt a cause and see it to completion. Either give women with breast cancer prostheses, give pediatric nutrition, give larynx in my area a speaking button, and see that this is sustainable. So this is just a message again I want to give. And maybe Charu can respond to this as well. As corporate, you all give money, but I would love you all to adopt one cause.
So I completely agree with you, Dr. Anil, and that's what we do. Because our team is very focused to see that every penny goes and is useful. It has impact, right? So we monitor the impact on what we are putting in towards anything that we do in CSR. And whenever we partner with NGOs such as Cuddles, etc., we ask them, so what program do you want us to fund for when we plan for the year? And then we monitor and partner with them through the year and then fund for that specific program. Is it, nutrition for, children under in a certain hospital, or for training, or for whatever purpose it is? I completely agree with you that it shouldn't be just open-ended funding. It has to be very specific, because only then you can monitor what the impact has been.
We are coming at the end of our time here, so I'll like closing remarks from each of the panelists. But before that, I have a question for Purnota, and if she can, include that in her remark. How is technology being leveraged to have better outcomes?
So I can only speak of nutrition and what we are doing in Cuddles. So I'd like to very quickly talk about the Food Heals app that we have made. The app was actually established because we saw that the kind of skill and talent we get in tier 2, tier 3 cities is very different from the skill and talent that we get in, let's say a Bombay or a Delhi. So we developed this app which made the care geo-agnostic, which means that wherever you are in the country, you will get the same level of care. It really automates all the complex calculations our nutritionists do on a calculator, and auto spits out the grade of malnourishment. And then it also has started now giving recommendations of what kind of food, etc., which is based on big data that we are seeing. One of the amazing, I would say, outcomes of this that we did not expect is this deep insights that we are getting into what works, what doesn't work, which is helping us to take our efficiencies up. Charu spoke about impact. It is our app which is now enabling us across the country to really give numbers and impact numbers to say that in this program, this is how the metrics moved by X%, and we can slice it, dice it by, gender, age, kind of cancer, all of that. So yeah, at Cuddles, we are really leveraging technology to make sure that we are getting sharper in what we do.
Thank you, Purnota.
That's from me, Swagata. Thank you.
Swagata, if I again want to make a very, very general question, there are a lot of innovations in pediatrics. I mean, they're 10, 15. If we give Girish, will be here till breakfast tomorrow morning with him telling us about all the innovations. But again, I'm making a very general statement. In cancer care, there's something called equity. There's a cancer divide among those that have and those that have not. And sometimes innovation widens this divide, because the innovation is so sophisticated that the guys who have benefit from it and the guys who don't have don't benefit at all. Again, a very general statement. So for researchers in our country, look at innovations that can be applied to our population and to our community so that our people can benefit. That's a very general message I want to give. Dr. Sethi got the Jaipur foot. There's so many people who innovate and they've got modular prostheses, but it never was applicable because our people sat cross-legged on the floor. They used an Indian style commode. And here was something that came out. So my, again, statement to the people who fund, people who are listening, who do research like Girish, do something that our people can benefit. That's it, a very general statement.
Thank you, Dr. Anil. Anyone else who want to give their closing remarks?
Yeah, Swagata, thank you so much. That was an invigorating session. And I also learned from my colleagues and from people like Purnota who are doing different stuff. Coming from a management background and a corporate background to nutrition must be quite a leap. I actually would like to just add 2 points. Number one, although I would totally be the strongest advocate for suggesting that we should do research in developing point of care technologies, appropriate costing, minimal side effects, keeping in view our nutrition and various financial issues. But also we should innovate in dosing of medicines, which a person can take back to the village and have it oral instead of, say, intravenous or intramuscular. And a lot of these things are coming out from our major centers. So appropriate technology for appropriate people is really, and as the saying goes, the different strokes for different folks. So that's most important. But at the same time, we also have to keep plugging into research, which is cutting edge. One aspect which you might have heard about, there is from, say, example like St. Jude's, you have the genome project called the Pediatric Cancer Genome Project. You might be not knowing that India has just started an Indian Cancer Genome Project. They're starting with breast cancer, and I happen to be one of the directors for that. And that's a not-for-profit. So we hopefully will be able to generate data and Indian data, and we can share it with our colleagues around the country and overseas if needed. And similarly, somewhere on the horizon will be the Pediatric Cancer Genome Atlas as well, going forwards with the right support from not only the government, but also private donors, which we are approaching as we speak. So these are 2 aspects I wanted to briefly talk about. And I wish all of you guys the very best going forward.
Charu, if you would like to give some remarks.
Yes, I would just like to add, I think there's great power in collaboration. My request would be to all who are listening and companies who come, under Schedule 7 to pick up such causes because, our children are our future. If we can increase our, pathetic numbers from 45% to higher 80%, I think that should be a goal for us. So if we all, come together on a common cause, we will only lead to better outcomes and greater impact. Different companies bring different values, expertise to the table. And when all resources are clubbed together, I think the scale just increases. I think there's a lot of power in unity. So if we can all think about it, how we can work together to benefit the children of our country, it'll be very powerful.
Thank you, Charu. Dr. Girish, any closing remarks?
Yeah, thanks, Swagata. All I would like to say is that every child with cancer deserves the best chance at cure. And I think that best chance can be very well given in India to every child, provided we all come together, collaborate, and work together to deliver the cancer care.
Thank you to all the experts who came together, and we had a great discussion. And maybe we are closer to the fulfilling this gap between what the Western countries have and what India has in curing childhood cancer. So I think with holistic care, collaboration with corporates, with research coming into fore, we are very close to meeting that gap. Thank you everyone for joining in today.